Hello and welcome to the IGN UK podcast. We've changed our theme tune this week, and I'll get to that in a second, but I'm joined by the lovely Daniel Krupa.
Hey everyone.
And Mr. Kieron Gillen, which is the reason we have changed our theme tune this week. We've changed it to Summer Camp's Pink Summer. Now that's quite a special song for you, which we'll sort of get to later, but maybe, you know, for the people who don't know who you are, if you want to sort of introduce yourself in a better way than I probably can.
I just feel very honoured that the theme tune has changed to Pink Summer, which is
the first time we've ever changed the theme tune, maybe?
Yeah, you've broken with 265 episodes of tradition there, so...
I didn't check it.
Did you clear this?
I really didn't, actually.
Yes, we're destroying society. I've walked into a room and already actually destroyed a culture, which is kind of what I do. My name is Kieron Gillan. I'm primarily a writer. I also a dancer.
Yeah.
Not a lover, sadly.
I've seen you dance. You're a great dancer.
Didn't know what you were going to say then.
You don't get to correct the lover part. No, I write comics now. I used to be a games critic, so I used to write for a load of magazines and places like that. I moved into comics somehow, and I basically write books for Marvel, as in I've written stuff like Uncanny X-Men and Iron Man, and Journey into Mystery and Young Avengers, and I could go on and on. And I do my own books for like Phonogram, which was my first book, and Wiccan Divine, which is my current book, and books like Uber and Mercury Heat that's coming out. And I could really ramble on, but I write a lot of comics.
Yeah, that is what we're going to do.
Yeah. That's a big part of today's podcast.
It is indeed, yeah. So we usually start sort of our podcast with, what have you been playing, watching, or reading of interest lately? Anything? You don't have to say yeah.
What I have. Tell you, last year's weird because that's a guy who was obsessed by games forever.
Yeah.
2014 was pretty fallow. I barely played anything in the mainstream at all. I did no more than 5 hours in any AAA game, which is literally unheard of since 97 was the last time I had a year with that fallow of gaming.
Yeah. Was there a particular reason for that, or was it just work overtaking?
I think my heart just wasn't in it. Yeah. It was like the year before was really bad, and my energies were elsewhere. And I was playing some board game stuff, but since the new year, things have picked up, which is quite exciting because, you know, my wife bought a PS4 when I was away on a business trip and returned to find the PS4 in the front room. I was kind of upset being a PC Master Race kind of guy. What's this? What the hell is this box? I threw it through the window and stomped around, but eventually I was seduced to playing some games. So we've basically been playing Diablo 3 co-op.
Oh, cool.
So it's me and my wife have been sitting on the sofa, and bashing the living hell out of boxes and collecting it. So it's kind of involves killing and shopping. Yeah. So it's this kind of like this weird... I always think Sex and the City could basically translate to Diablo 3. Yeah. In that it's about getting increasingly fancy loot and then wearing it and killing more things. Not as much killing. Swap sex for killing, and you basically got it. But yeah, that's been good. I had some friends over on Saturday, like 2 couples of me and my wife's. Yeah. And we played like 11 hours of board game stuff, like 6 different games. We played an entire array of what was it? In order. We played the Resistance. We started that, so we started Paranoia and Hatred. Then moved on to Dixit, so a bit of like French whimsicality.
I do love Dixit. Those cards are just incredible.
Yeah, they are incredible. It's like, if you haven't seen Dixit, there's basically a game where you have to try to work out what these cards could mean, and it's all basically a load of like Freudian dream imagery. Yeah. It's you look at them and it's my wife's...
You'll love it.
Unpacking dream symbolism.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, the game basically works like, you have to like... it's almost like whimsical French adventure game version of like Cards Against Humanity. Yeah. In this kind of, you have to pick a card and say a word like the feeling of sadness, and you put your card down face down, and everyone else has to pick their card they think means the feeling of sadness. Okay. Yeah. Then everyone has to guess which one was yours. So it's about how you think and how you describe, and it's a really kind of soft game, which is nice.
It is really good. Like because I've played it so much, I've managed to find a way to game it in a sense which sort of spoils it for some people who've played with me before, because if I'm playing with new people, you can just do it. It's like playing poker. You can pick up a card in a certain way, or I can look a certain way at a card, or spend so much time on a card, because you're allowed to pick them up and look at them and stuff like that. And I find it really easy to influence other people's decisions. So then people, I'm basically Darren Brown, but I find it easy. And my ex-girlfriend refused to play with me. Oh wow! And it's such a lovely game. To have someone refuse to play with you probably says a lot about me. To be honest.
I mean, the way that the traditional way,
really sad way to end that digression. Just like, my ex-girlfriend didn't want to play with me.
Yeah, it is a strange, because it's not really that. Because winning doesn't really matter in any way. Yeah. It's one of those games.
So what's it called, sorry?
Dixit, Dixit.
What's the meaning of that?
I don't know.
I forget. My wife, it's Latin. I forget what it means.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. Sorry, someone spoke Latin told me what it meant. I forgot it.
Yeah, that's good.
And then Illuminati, and that was, and they played that card flappy game, and I literally forget what that's called. Double. We played Double, Illuminati retro conspiracy game. We did play Cards Against Humanity, and there was one more game. There was a day of so much gaming I forgot it. Oh, and I played my first Warhammer Fantasy Battle game since
amazing
94.
Okay.
Wow.
Which was an amusing thing to do.
Was this a Christmas present you had?
It's like
or
I've been quite basically. I've got the awful. I say awful. It's actually quite lucky. Almost anything I like doing, I can turn into money.
Okay.
And that becomes weird because, like, if I listen to music, I can turn that into money, or everything becomes work. And I sort of started painting Skaven, which are like the warmer fantasy rat men.
Yeah.
And I started painting them in 2008. I can't paint for toffee, but it's incredibly soothing. This cannot profit me in any way. This will not impress women. No one will love me anymore for doing this. I silently daub these. I stopped looking at the internet. It's incredibly soothing. I feel like that very old man at the bottom of the shed and painting loud soldiers is literally the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm at the point now where I've actually I painted enough for an army. So I talked to a friend, let's have a game. And we've had a game and it was hilarious. It was literally, everything exploded and almost we laughed ourselves sick all the way through it. It was a really great joy.
So that's amazing.
Now he's bought a load of Undead, so we're going to do another game at some point.
That's excellent.
Yeah, so that was a weirdly life-affirming selection of things which make me remember how much I love gaming, because how important it has been to me at different times.
Oh,
so
definitely.
A good start to the year, basically.
Wow,
that is good,
as well.
I'm obsessed with a board game at the moment called The Sheriff of Nottingham.
What's that like?
That's one you bought recently, isn't it? Yeah.
So good, yeah. It's so basically, I don't even think, there's sort of a board to it, but basically you're a store owner. The sheriff comes round to the store. Everyone takes it in turn to be sheriff, and it's kind of like Cheat, the card game Cheat, where you have these little pouches, and you can try and you have to basically make the most money by lying about what's in your pouch or telling the truth. So you've got your sort of bread, chicken, apples, and something else, and cheese, but you've also got contraband. Like I think one of them's an axe, and things like that. And you can sort of. But it's all about lying to the sheriff and convincing him not to open your bag, or if he opens it and you're actually not telling the truth, you are actually telling the truth, you get loads of money as well. I'm not explaining it very well. It is really good. That sounds
good. You've actually made me remember what the sixth game was, which was Masquerade.
Okay, cool.
Which is kind of like Love Letter, if you know that.
Love Letter's amazing.
It's another game of bluff and lying and trying to work out. It's basically each card allows you to do a certain thing, but you never know which card you have.
Yeah.
And you swap between them, and it becomes very confusing, and you're basically bluffing on not knowing what your card is.
Yeah.
So you say, I'm definitely the king.
Yeah.
And they go on the table and someone calls you or not. So it's a very quick game of complete confusion and lying.
Excellent,
But I'm a big fan of that one as well.
It's really good. Like, I didn't really explain Sheriff of Nottingham very well. It is really good.
It's weird, as in playing all these board games, because I'm friends with Quentin Smith.
Yeah.
Shut Up and Sit Down, which is an amazing website.
Yeah.
But sort of that, and also Rab Florence, and seeing him go into into board games pretty much the same time I was, how much I've discovered certain things about myself, and as in I'm quite bad at telling when certain people are lying to me.
Okay.
As in
your wife or like friends?
Generally speaking, I trust women more than men.
Okay.
And that's an and I realised across almost all board games.
Yeah.
I intrinsically distrust men, and I've a basic fondness for women.
So all female listeners, basically your third game to be deep.
I look back at my life and realise, I need to rethink everything. As in, I really have in a semi way. It's like when my mum was playing Resistance one Christmas, last year. Sorry, the Christmas before last.
Yeah.
And she completely lied a perfect game. And I was looking at her and the scales fell from my eyes. And I realised how powerful my mum was. So don't trust my mum is what I'm saying. No one trusts my mum.
See, I can't play Werewolf with anyone. Have you ever played Werewolf? No. Like, you'd love that as well. Because I can't... And basically, that's... it's not a board game. It's just a sort of parlour game where it's kind of like, I guess, Wink Murder or Mafia. There's other games like that. Where two of you are the werewolves and you have to all go to sleep. People die. Then you have to sort of... all the villagers have to decide who they're going to hang. And I can't play that because it's all about lying and it's all about convincing people. So if I'm... And obviously I'm...
The hairiest man in the room.
One, I look like a werewolf.
Who's the werewolf?
But because I'm so mouthy, if I'm quiet, people suspect me straight away. If I'm just myself, people go, well, he's blatantly the werewolf because look how like Chopsy's being, everyone else is being really quiet. So I literally can't play that game. Yeah,
I'm so in Resistance. People distrust me in Resistance. Yeah, I'm not trustworthy.
Well, that's really good. So you're saying then, so you've moved away almost from video games to just be board games, but
2015 might be a year where you drum.
I've literally forgotten the name of the game. It was RPS's Game of the Year.
Okay.
Eternal, the Civ clone, involving fantasy Civ clone. Rock Paper Shotgun's Game of the Year. I've literally Eternal Legend.
Yeah, okay.
I've been playing.
If you didn't remember that, then you're going to absolute murders.
Yeah, so I still like I'm on Rock Paper Shotgun on the website. I'm still kind of involved with them.
Yeah, you're a co-founder.
I am as a co-founder. Yeah. I'm actually literally a suit. So I've no suit at the website. I'm literally a publisher, which is terrible. As in I've kind of ascended to a lower level. But yeah, I was playing that and I quite like it. It hasn't quite clicked for me because there's something. What's the word? I just don't think it's as weird as everyone else. I was expecting it to be weirder, and it's quite uninspiring.
Okay.
And then it's clearly got a lot of quality there, but I'm not like immediately in love with it.
Okay.
But you know, I will try to persist with it.
Yeah. But obviously, so you started out, you know, as a games critic, and you know, a lot of people will almost credit you for being one of the first real games critics, I guess.
Tarky once said, some might say he invented games journalism, which just literally makes me laugh myself sick.
So I got a tattoo of that.
Like, if I've had a book, I put it on the back, obviously. Yeah. But it's like, I don't think
no matter what the book is about.
Exactly.
I invented all of this.
All this is mine, and I own this now. No, that's lewd. I mean, it's like there's really. I started writing about games in '94. That's when I was at university, and I basically paid my way for my second year at university writing for Amiga Power.
Okay.
But you know, I was a Games Press obsessive. I can still quote Stuart Campbell and Jonathan Nash reviews. I can quote a Duncan MacDonald review from '87, I think. Which was Stunt Car Racer, an entire opening about being as happy as a sandboy. So I really was kind of like into the Games Press. I'm somebody who's always really enjoyed games writing in a way that is somewhat obsessional.
Yeah.
But you know, I came from that background. I was basically somebody who loved both music writing, which has always been more pretentious, and games writing. And so I kind of like put that all together, and that's what I kind of did.
So basically found a way to make games writing as pretentious as music writing.
At times, but also like, you know, I did more knob gags than most people ever, you know, as in it was a weird kind of mix.
Well, that's sort of expected, isn't it?
It's flowery knob gags.
Yeah. It's like I basically ripped off everybody I loved, and that's kind of what I've always done as a writer. As in that kind of my influences are quite obvious.
But you like those influences then? Sorry.
Oh, I mean, like in Games Press, it's like I was a genuinely enormous Amiga Power fanboy, and it's like being able to write for them in the last 12 issues is kind of like being in the Beatles.
Yeah.
I mean, I played Triangle in the Beatles. That wasn't anything important, but I got to, you know, I was on the credits.
Yeah.
And that was, in retrospect, I was a religiously fanatical AP fan. It was a bit worrying, to be honest. So, I mean, Jane Ash, Stuart Campbell, I will always love Cam for hiring me. The music press, especially the guys of the period, like Simon Reynolds, who's an amazingly precise music journalist and very academic. I always admired him because he was someone I couldn't write like him. I could never quite do that. But, like, of my journal, like Neil Kulkarni, Taylor Parks from the Melody Maker at the time, Simon Price, those are kind of like quite important people to me. And I dug back, I've read my Lester Bangs, I've read my Nick Kent and my Paul Morley. I'm a big Paul Morley fan. Paul Morley's Words and Music is kind of the big influence on Phonogram, which is a comic about pop music.
Yeah.
And it kind of like metaphorical pop music folded into this kind of weird structure. So yeah, all that really, I guess.
And then how does the sort of rock, paper, shotgun stuff come about then? Did you guys, I mean, it's obviously just spotting a gap in the market, I guess, is it?
It was one of those weird, like, this is something I often say about RPS, in that people get into the idea of doing what you think is right is automatically anti-commercial, and that is a defeatist attitude. It's the kind of the idea that it means that if your band then sells any copies of records, it can't be any good.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like a defeatist narrative that's sold to us by people who frankly want to keep you on your knees. I mean, so you sort of, I've been making jokes so far, and you've suddenly got me. You can hear the segue into angry man who writes manifestos about games.
Right, everyone brace yourself. We're changing gear.
Hold entertainment. But it's like kind of, there's a lot of narratives that the world tries to sell you, which are frankly will only hurt you if you believe it. With RPS, it was a case of like there was no good PC games website, and there's not really an easy way to phrase that. But in terms of like doing something that was agile and was able to do the sort of stuff that RPS did in its early years, and still tries to do, there wasn't anyone doing it, and we thought, well, Paradox has ads money. So it's a really basic, in that kind of like, if we could get an audience, we thought it would be financially worthwhile. At the same time, there clearly should be a site. But then it was probably Jim's idea, as in Jim Rossignol. He kind of pushed it, and he recruited me and Alec and John. I was living with Jim at the time, and Jim was an old school mate all the way from PC Gamer, and I just split up with a long-term girlfriend, so I was pretty much like sleeping on his sofa. Let's do a website, and it was like, actually it could work, so I decided to give it 3 years and see how it would go. And when I kind of left when the site stabilised, when we started actually being able to pay wages to everyone and everything was fine. But yeah, it was one of those situations where let's do a website because we, in our way, and of course what RPS is good at, it's very good at, and what it's not very good at, it's not very good at. It's kind of like it's a website very clearly run by writers. Which means we fall downstairs a lot, and we're not, and we get confused by cups of tea and all those kind of things. But the level of freedom there was a lot of fun. It was the idea. It's kind of like, since I was really late in my career, we launched in 2007 as a games writer. And I said I started in 1994. I actually presumed I would never get to launch a magazine. And it took me to about a year into RPS till I realised, wait, no, this is
exactly what I'm doing.
This is that moment.
This is it, and it's an astounding legacy. And I use that word in that kind of, people not listening won't be able to see my eyes sort of be confused by this, but how incredibly proud I am of what the guys have achieved. And because we started with a WordPress site in favours. It's not like a sort of Polygon which launches with all the money in the world.
Huge sponsorship.
Exactly. We launched with we're going to do. You can tell we put the work in because you basically all our wages cut by a third with other freelance.
Wow.
And we just we made that investment and we just did it. And we cashed in all our favours. And it worked, which is very lucky. And the thing is, we've seen a lot of people try to do other websites and they haven't worked for different reasons. And a lot of it's being lucky. We just never underestimate being lucky. But a specific time, a specific place. I mean, like the timing, the sort of gaming we believed in was kind of coming more into focus. Because if you think of 2007, that's the start of that period of the indie boom. So we kind of believe that PC gaming, quote unquote, it should be wider. We kind of quite deliberately said we redefined PC gaming to be anything on a PC, anything on a keyboard, and we defined PCs to include like spectrums. And the idea of here is instead of a PC being a format, a PC is an ideology. An ideology, by definition, is very open, and we define ourselves against console and any form of closed gaming. Not because we didn't like console gaming, because we do, but we kind of
demarcate a space.
And we were aware that gaming is so big. It was big then. It's bigger now. There was space to just concentrate on part of it and cover it as much as we could inside there. As opposed to even the very big sites which have enormous resources such as IGN aren't covering everything. And the idea
going back to board games, there was discussion since my time being here where we talked about, should we launch a channel called IGN Analog or something in board games and tackle it? It's like, is that too far straying from our remit? Which probably is. And other sites, like you mentioned, do it better than we would ever be able to do it. So again, it's knowing what you do and doing it well.
So that was
best of your ability. And
we were kind of we were quite. We weren't quite an optimistic site to begin with. We've kind of become more cynical now. But the idea that we were we're quite pro pushing that idea of like gaming is worthwhile and this is an interesting way to spend our time. So it was fun. It was fun and awful at the same time. I actually made a board game about running a games blog. I've got a prototype. It's like it's an operative prototype.
You need to bring that in, and we need to play that definitely.
You will laugh yourself sick. It's a semi-cooperative board game about.
That describes our team.
Exactly. It's very clear. You get stories. You decide who's going to write the story, and basically you have to hit traffic targets. And if you fail to hit a traffic target, everyone's sacked.
I want to play this.
You are. You are playing this
with your own life.
You don't know the consequences. You haven't been fully briefed yet. You don't know what the end game is.
But only one person can win. And you win individually by gaining prestige points.
I'm not going to win.
And I was like, so you have to. Okay, I'm not going to write that story. The top 10 girls in games. I lose prestige. But we need the traffic. And so you make the.
So we take it.
So it's been sitting around, and one day I'll get around to finishing it. But it's a giggle.
I'm interested to see it. So I mean,
so I swear the audience of that game is literally the people in this room.
Let's kickstart that. Anyone listening to this, let's kickstart that. I'm interested though. So you were at PC Gamer when you guys launched or decided to launch Rock Paper Shotgun. Is that right? Or
no, I left PC Gamer in 2003. We were all freelancers.
Right. Okay. Cool.
So we launched in 2000. So I was like freelancers for getting on for 5 years before we launched RPS.
Right. Okay.
We still quite often did freelance for PC Gamer.
Of course,
we worked for Eurogamer. We all worked. I mean, I'd worked for pretty much everybody. In fact, I found myself walking in today. I don't think I've ever worked for IGN, which is weird. I've literally, from The Guardian to Wired.
We're not paying you for this.
But if you want to credit, it's fine.
Give me a review quickly.
I'm just sort of interested to see, like, what was there with what you wanted to do with Rock Paper Shotgun, was there no possible way that obviously huge ties to PC Gamer and things, who at the time I don't think had a site, or the site wasn't I'm just curious what was there about PC Gaming that you thought there's no way that we could actually do what we wanted to do with them?
Well, we like to own it. I mean, it's like in a very. This is kind of, you talk about the PC ideology. Yeah. It's the idea that we can do it, and therefore we shall. I mean, and we had no desire to work inside a larger organisation. I mean, I'm temperamentally unsuited to doing it, because I keep on saying things like this. I have a tendency to have a mouth and opinion and kind of live with it. That sounds self-aggrandizing. I don't mean it in that way.
No.
I highly enjoyed spending 5 years at Future, and I left because I was burnt out. And then I kind of ambled along freelance, and that's when I started writing comics. And by I got to this point, I was more up for doing something in a more organised fashion. We saw the hole, and we were aware that Future weren't about to do it. I mean, we didn't seem to have been trying to push for us. I mean, there was a PC gamer website present at the time, but they weren't quite together in the same way, I think. And the chance to actually own it was worthwhile. And it's kind of if it works, this is useful. Yeah, that's all I can say. And it's one of the things that I don't even want to say. It's at working at PC Gamer, I became aware of how much money PC Gamer made. Yeah, and I don't say this in a bad way. And I was also aware of how little I was getting paid. And that's capitalism. And I became aware of
that should be my money.
And I was there's certainly if we owned the means of production, we would own that. So that's what I mean. It's like it was ideologically the right thing to do. Yeah. But it was also a financially sensible business model. I could actually, like I said, explain why I thought this site would work with a cold head as well as my hot head, and that's kind of the idea that both aren't contradictory. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. Talking about, I hate talking about the money in that way. But,
I just had an epiphany. I don't get paid for this podcast. So.
Yeah. Well, no, he's not. So don't tell him. So that's interesting. So around then you started writing comics, and I'd love to hear how you decided to start that and where that took you.
Were you always a comics fan as a kid, or it's
a weird one. That's that no sounded disbelieving. As an actual real kid, as in a pre-teen. I read all the stuff on the newsagent shelves, and that kind of that. Especially at my age, was a very casual thing to do. Yeah, and I kind of fell out of comics in the teens because I'm from Stafford and I don't believe it had a comic shop then. So even if I wanted to go into comics, I couldn't. But I was, especially because I read the music press, I read the games press. Especially at that time, there was kind of a soft discussion of it, as in the idea that they talked about Watchmen, they talked about Dark Knight Returns. It was in the air. Your Sinclair at the time, there was an awareness of this is part of culture. So I knew about stuff, and I thought, that sounds interesting.
I'd love to read that.
I'd love to read that. There's no access to it. Yeah. So in my 20s, I picked up Watchmen when I was 21, and that was kind of like my headshot moment. Yeah. And that kind of changed me fundamentally. But it took me until I was 25. I was about my 2.5 years into PC Gamer. I just started going to comic shops more often, because there's one in Bath, which is where Future's based. Yeah. And one day I just hit a book called The Authority by Warren Ellis, and I kind of fell in. And that moved me very quickly. Next week I discovered Planetary. Next week I discovered Transmet. Yeah. The week after that I was on the Warren Ellis Forum, which was a very, very big thing in circa 2000. In fact, a lot of the quite larger names of creators circa now kind of came from there. You're talking about people like Matt Fraction.
That's amazing.
And Ken with Kelly Sue, and it was almost like a revolutionary sell. Yeah. It feels. I was saying this very weird about how successful Image is right now. Feels like the WEF winning. This is kind of what our idea is what comics should be. Yeah. Transplanted forward 15 years, which is very strange. But I sort of, and then one else form was acted as my education. I basically learned so much about comics because people talked about stuff, and it was very Catholic education. It was manga and French comics and American comics, and it was all kind of viewed as a kind of, this is the medium. So I fell in love in that kind of way. I went to my first con 6 months after that, came home drunk from that con, wrote my first strip. And the next year, I had my first webcomic out, and the year after that, I took a collection of these webcomics to the con, was selling them. A guy called Jamie McKelvey walked up, showed me his portfolio, and I said we should do a book called Phonogram. And then 4 years after that, Phonogram's out. Yeah. So it's that kind of, I just basically people say it's like people who are late converts to religion are a lot more fanatical than early converts. Okay. Yeah. I was a late convert. And I'm I came in with all this energy. And I was kind of heading towards being... I stress I really did enjoy my time at Future.
Yeah.
But at that point, 2.5 years into being there, I was aware that I'd kind of done not everything I could do there, but I was aware that I was like writing about 50 pages a month or something.
Jesus.
Like I think my highest for PC Gamer was 37. But I was still doing about 10, 12, 13 pages of freelance to other people. Plus page counts were much bigger. Word counts were much bigger then. We're like there was like 800 words a page.
Nice.
So, but I was like, that was like, if you actually read PC Gamer that period, like 1998 to like 2000, you're pretty much reading my diary, and like you can map it. I'm like, there's a running joke like Eurogamer readers mock it. Yeah. In that kind of, it's a Kieron Gillen stealth girlfriend review. when I'm really sort of mentioning, this girl I was seeing, it was very complicated.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was really just all the creative ideas I had went to that magazine. And at that point, I realised why I'm actually doing this, and that's kind of, I started working less hard on the magazine. As in not to the level of complete and utter psychosis. And started doing
siphoning something off
and doing my own. And for that point onwards, I basically my day job was a video game journalist, and my night job was I worked on comics. And eventually, people started paying me for the comics. Like I said, 2006 was Phonogram, and then I started getting work for hire stuff like the year after that, like 2007, 2008. And when people started paying me, I started doing it during the day because I could work out and eat by doing this.
Yeah.
And about the time 2009, I realised despite thinking I am a games journalist who occasionally does comics, I looked at the money I was making. No, I'm a comic writer who occasionally does games journalism. So I started thinking myself in that way. And in 2010, I kind of explicitly did a kind of it is over now. I am now not doing any more games journalism except when I kind of help myself.
How did you adapt to writing comics, and how do you approach writing a comic? Do you write very detailed descriptions? Do you direct the art, or do you write a very loose kind of set of notes you hand over? Yeah.
In fact, I mean, there's two traditional ways of writing comics, and which is Marvel method, and I apologise if I'm being boring to anybody who knows this, and the full script.
I think it's good. I think it's good.
Yeah. Marvel method is the short way of describing it was pretty much invented by Marvel in the 60s, and the idea is the writer writes a story almost, occasionally broken up into pages, as in this happens on this page one, but occasionally not, and then the artist adapts the story, and then the writer comes in afterwards and adds the dialogue.
Okay.
And that's got various strengths. There's a kind of symbiotic energy, and the artist has a lot more freedom.
Yeah.
Its weaknesses, it would include, it really is putting a lot of faith in the artist. If it goes wrong, it goes amazingly wrong.
It's really good when you have Jack Kirby.
If I could actually resurrect Jack Kirby, it might work. And I've done some stuff in Marvel Method, it's worth stressing, but it's kind of, it just puts so much faith in the artist.
Yeah.
And in terms of like, it's the Warren Ellis, I learned to write from reading a few Warren Ellis columns. That was my starting place. And it's what so you may be thinking these pages have to be talking heads, like a serious conversation where you explain the plot, and the artist may think I really want to have a draw picture of a dinosaur. And then you come back and you realise you've got a page of dinosaur. I've got to put some dialogue on the dinosaur. And I've had some dialoguing dinosaur moments because that's that's part of the fun of the medium. Oh my god, what the hell am I going to do? Full script is the other way of doing it, and the way I primarily works. And it's like the world's most anal screenplay. In terms of page one, panel one, medium shot of three men talking about comics in the IGN room. The men look like this, descriptions, dialogue, Kieron, colon. I'm going to tell you about comics. Panel two, close on Kieron, waving his hands around like an idiot. Comics, this is, you know what I mean?
Very common.
That sounds really good though. But it's like controlling that sounds amazing.
And the question is that you can write that. It's but the artist, how much will the artist choose to follow it?
He has to submit to it in a way.
And I don't want them. I think it's a soft back and forth. As in, I start all my scripts. I write heavy scripts. I mean, not heavy like Alan Moore. Alan Moore does about like 20,000 words a script, and not light. There's people who write lighter than me. My scripts for like Marvel tend to be about 5,000-6,000 words. My scripts for like creator-owned projects tend to be a bit longer. I generally write what I need. And I tend to make myself quite personal. If I know the artist, I write jokes for them, and I talk in a human way. Pretty much all my scripts start with, I write the way I write because I want to make sure there is a way to tell the story. This is not saying you have to tell the story this way. You're an artist, you've got a better visual imagination than I am by definition. That's why you're the artist.
Interested, do you ever draw anything? Because I listened to interviews with Jeff Johns and Grant Morrison, and they kind of do rough sketches they hand off to the artist. But again, as kind of suggestions and...
I only sketch when I only sketch when something I am trying to describe as impossible.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it. As in, like, there's definitely... Me and Jamie McKelvey tend to push the form. So occasionally I get an idea for a sequence, and that it just doesn't translate to words. So I'll do a scribble or like that kind of thing, and then and Jamie will run with it. It's like... I mean, I normally describe my scripts a bit like love letters. Okay. It's about trying to seduce somebody into making them do what you want to do. As in, please fall in love with me.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is that element to it for me. As in, here is a persuasive argument why I think this is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
But tell me if I'm full of shit. Sorry.
That's fine.
So that's kind of the collaboration is really the interesting part of it for me.
And actually,
but for me, the reason why I write full script is because I like comics and I like stories, but specifically I got into comics to write comics.
Yeah.
And if I'm not writing full script and calling individual panels, not necessarily like the details, but if I'm not doing the pacing that level, I don't feel I'm writing comics. I feel I'm writing a story which someone else adapts to comics.
Yeah.
And that's kind of not something I'm particularly interested in, because if it was, I would get into a different medium.
Yeah.
But that's my particular approach.
Yeah. Do you find yourself like quite lucky then that Jamie walked up when he did?
It's weird. Again, it's like
luck, like you said,
because I put your work together so much. Like, I don't know if you took either one of you out, what it would look like. It's fine, don't worry. I don't know if you took either you out of the equation. It's a completely different thing. I don't know how it would work.
No, it's I think about it quite a bit, and you get these kind of weird stories about bands forming or creators meeting.
And he literally just walked up to you.
Yeah. To be fair, you could see us, if you look at our history and our shared social group, you could see these people circling together.
Right.
This is one of my general pieces of advice to like creators when they say, I mean, I get asked quite a bit, how do you get into it? Or how do you think I should get into it? And it's like immersing yourself in fandom and finding the part of fandom which is you. There's many parts of fandom which I wouldn't, I'm not that guy. There's I'm not interested in that part of like comics.
Yeah.
But there are people and there's nothing wrong with that. Those people get together. It's only like games, just like, if you were like, you hang out with RTS people, you're going to make an RTS game. People who care about certain things, and that's what scenes.
Yeah.
And we were moving these particles into scenes, and me and Jamie have an overlapping and often shared aesthetic.
Yeah.
You'd like to say that it's inevitable to meet. In practice, it's not.
Yeah.
You're very lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So then at what point, obviously, like Phonogram came out, and at what point then were you approached by Marvel, or were you sending them things, or you were a guy that they approached and came to?
I never went. I mean, so I got into comics like the full on in love with comics in 2000, and in 2010 I was writing 4. And that's a kind of, if you think about it in any serious way,
it's amazing.
That makes no sense.
Bonkers.
Yeah, it's like
it's gonna be a lot of people listening going like, what?
I know. It's like it was an intense. When I was learning to write comics, you could sort of tell the comics I was writing because they were very clearly inspired by what I'd read the week before. And I don't mean like characters. I mean like storytelling methods.
Yeah.
It's like when I was reading the week I read Luthor Arkwright, I was doing these big 12-panel slow motion scenes, and the week I read not week I read Cerebus, more than week. These kind of like the multi-panel transition across stuff. You can sort of see me
you're like rapidly absorbing stuff,
and that's kind of you absorb your influences and eventually metabolize them into something which is basically you. And that's that was the same as games writing. That's the same as like any writing, really. I think. You've got to allow it to be derivative, and hopefully get over it. I've lost track of the track.
Segue into Marvel.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't ever really see myself as a Marvel writer. Yeah. I mean, I like Marvel comics. I got in like circa 2000, which is like where Joe Quesada was basically
resetting
that. But very much changing the beat of Marvel and a very different company. And it's like this is new X-Men by Grant and Frank. Books like I particularly love, like Pete Milligan. Pete Milligan's one of my favourite comic writers, and Allred doing X-Force and those kind of books. And they was like, they had a sensibility that appealed to me. So that's one reason in the period I leant towards Marvel.
Yeah.
But I never really saw myself as the guy pitching them, as much as I loved the thing. So I basically had my stuff out there. What actually, I'm lying. I sort of semi-pitched a Dazzler story at them because Matt Fraction was writing for them at the time. And people used to in interviews ask me what Marvel, what superheroes do you want to write?
Yeah.
And of course, this is kind of Comics Press, and God bless Comics Press, I love them. But like, if I'm hyping my dodgy indie book, I'm not very interested in talking about stuff that isn't,
of course, yeah.
my, you know, and that's kind of, and also the fact that superheroes dominate the conversation is problematic. So I have a prepared joke answer, and the prepared joke, obviously I want to write Dazzler, Phonogram being about pop music. So
it fits together quite well, though.
It gets a laugh. We move on.
Yeah.
But the problem by making that joke and being a writer, you just part of your brain starts thinking about it.
Maybe.
And I end up actually having this idea. So I just hammered out this idea for like Dazzler plays a gig on the moon to Celestials. It's basically a prog versus disco story. The entire synopsis was put online. I lobbed it up online last year after Greg Pact urged me to, and actually it went quietly viral in a small way. So anyone wants to see that, please Google it. It's passably funny. And Black Bolt sings backing vocals at the gig, and it's very stupid.
That's good.
So I lobbed that because they were looking for a Dazzler Mini, but it didn't work for lots of reasons. Not least it was utterly bonkers. I got in at Marvel. The thing about Phonogram is, obviously people listening probably haven't read it. Phonogram is this kind of like very low level urban fantasy comic about pop music being magic, specifically any music, and I've defined pop music in the widest terms. And it's very critically dense. It involves people sitting around and smoking cigarettes and not really doing much. There's no likable characters. There's no fight scenes. And it reviewed.
And then Marvel came knocking.
Marvel was like, we need more smoking.
Actually, people knew it reviewed very well, so it was good. But it doesn't really scream, this guy is definitely the guy to take over a 4. Warren Ellis, bless his cotton socks. I don't think he wears cotton socks. He was doing a book called Universal for Marvel, and there was Marvel wanted to do some tie-ins, like one-off, single issues. And what Warren said, okay, as long as I get to pick the writers. And Warren is an incredible. I was talking about this recently with other people, but Warren is the secret curator of like noughties comic culture. So many people owe Warren so much in terms of like he's somebody who genuinely cares about the medium and like tries to introduce people and gives so many people so much good advice. There's I don't even want to list names, but it's kind of like a lot of people owe Warren stuff. And so Warren, for these 3 things, Warren said I think Kieron should do one. And if Kieron should do the 1950s James Ellroy kind of one, which is called it's completely different to Phonogram. So I did that. And I'm pretty sure Marvel like raised their eyebrow a bit, but I did it, and it worked very. People seemed to like it, in terms of like, and it went around Marvel, and they said this is people like Phonogram. Whereas this guy can actually write superheroes as well. So this kind of like quite gritty, serious. I shot an alternate dimension Tony Stark in the first 3 pages, and we've got this kind of it showed I could do other things. Is the best thing. And like 2 other editors, Marvel, like messaged me. In fact, I thought there were 1 editor because I couldn't believe 2 editors who were interested in me. It was one of those kind of like completely failing to understand. And they offered me like these picture this other idea. Or like we're interested in a Dazzler story. My first Marvel Universe story was actually an 8-page Dazzler story separate to that. So like an 8-page story. Then said, okay, we've got this fill-in issue. Do that, and I did that, and then we got 3-issue mini. Do that. So it's kind of like by not messing up. That's the best way of putting it.
Keeps going.
I think kind of like I did work that was pleasing to them. On time, and all those kind of stuff, and it basically like playing a accumulator on a gambling machine, and it got to the point where it's like JMS quit 4, and it was like we need someone to actually take over 4 quickly in a really horrible position.
Hello.
Give it a shot. And I always joke about that. When I remember being on a comment thread, reading people like speculating who would be taking over, and I was like, I feel sorry for that guy. And then like a couple of days later, I get a phone call, and
so do I.
So, I am that guy. So yeah, it's the weird thing is like I got a break and didn't mess it up. It's kind of like it's like any form of freelance writing. It's like you try new writers all the time, and occasionally some people just do one review and it's so bad you never hire them ever again.
Does it come to a point where that relationship changes in a different way, where they say you're like one of our guys now? And then I don't know, was it like around Marvel Now or like something like that, where they said, did they offer you and go, what would you like to do?
It's like there's always dialogue. I mean, I was when I left RPS, I signed an exclusive with Marvel. That was I kind of timed at the same time. So there is those kind of conversations, and then what Marvel Now is like, they suggested things to me. They said, if you've got different ideas, you've got something you really want to do, talk about that. So yeah, there's the back and forth about, and there's a variety of books I am doing right now, which come from different places. That's not really a very good answer. That was a kind of fluffy answer. The answer is it's complicated.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't think I've ever pitched Marvel. When I say that, as in like all those kind of things, they came to me saying, "Oh, we want to do an Ares mini.
Yeah.
What have you got?" So it's that kind of like, I don't often think about other people's characters unless you are paying me.
Okay.
It's a good way of putting it. In that kind of the things I don't. And that sounds cynical to people.
No.
But it's not. It's like it's actually a kind of it's a professional distance because since you do not own the characters, you have to basically be a professional. So I have to that. I describe it as emotional contraceptives. At the same time, like, you know, I will give everything to any project I do.
Yeah.
But I have to still, on some level, know it is not quote unquote mine.
Yeah.
Okay,
that makes sense.
That sounds depressing. But I genuinely, I mean, that's a very like, and I love doing that. You know, it's and I love the challenge. I love the idea of someone phoning in me and. It's like, I always say Beta Ray Bill, the horse face.
Well, that's one of the early things you did for Marvel.
Yes, and it was like, I mean. What do? You get a phone call, go to a Beta Ray Bill story. So I sat down, looked at where he was in continuity, what he was up to, what were the major unrevealed plot threads, and then I started thinking, what's Beta Ray Bill really about? So I just sort of sit down and sort of think like this, sort of drumming your fingers. What does this this horse space monster mean? And I was like, well, he's an alien. That means that's science fiction. That's a fundamentally an atheistic construct. It's an ordered view of the world. It's rationalist. Yeah. At the same time, however, he is, he's been given the powers of a god, which is a theistic view of the world. This is an irrational view of the world. So this is the entire character is about contradiction, and he's also about this utterly ludicrous idea that he's a horse-faced god. So that the glorious like over the topness of the Marvel universe. Yeah. And I start like pulling the story together and adding Galactus. It's basically Beta Ray Bill tries to hunt down and kill Galactus. So this is basically a hunt for God story, but in a very literal hunting.
Literalizing it.
So that's the way I generally think. As in, it's kind of a critic's way of thinking. It's if you sort of,
I think so. Yeah, try and work out what's not been done, what has been done, what the hook is,
what is fundamental,
what's the inroad,
what interests you. I mean, I talk about Warren this is the third time I mentioned Warren in an interview, so I probably owe him money. It's like one thing I've always loved about his work.
It's the third time. It's like Beetlejuice. He'll appear.
He attacks us with his cane. It's like. It always worked for higher stuff. You can sort of tell he has found something I find interesting here, and it's like if you're not interested in the concept, it's going to be boring as hell. And it's also, I admire Warren's writing because it's about something, even if it's kind of like what you might think is like, oh, it's a Beta Ray Bill adventure story. It still has to have some form of meat there. I mean, that's the school I belong to. There's other writers who are definitely much more. I say a word like popcorn. It sounds like insulting. I don't mean that. But it's like the only way I can work is in that mode, which is the slightly over serious. I thought about this too much nonsense. Yeah. I hate myself. I'm literally listening to myself here. I hate myself. I hate myself.
Fine. I'm interested to see, like, so if you have an idea for a story when you're working on, a big name, and you want to bring in. How much license do you have? Just go, I actually want to bring in another character now.
You talked about continuity as well. Like, how much is what's the process for stuff like that? Because obviously, there's more continuity than you can ever reasonably digest in a short period of time. Yeah,
it's true.
It's hard. Like
you research it, especially current thing. It's like if you've got an idea, you go to the editors. It's like I want to use this character, and they'll say yes or no. The editors will talk to each other. And normally I've researched where somebody is. I mean, the main reason why that Dazzler story I originally wanted to pitch wouldn't have worked is that it was set on the dark side of the moon, where they were based for a while, but they weren't based there anymore.
Right, okay.
And also they were kind of out of play in a different way. So there was the Inhumans weren't available for that story, in which case that story cannot be published. And that story is reliant on that bit of continuity.
That's interesting, yeah.
So that was it might just been crap as well. But it was but there was at least that reason I justified to myself why they weren't going to go for it.
Yeah.
So there is that, but some of it is, you can look at continuity and make argues, can I use that? And they can, if Marvel think it's a good story, they will twist things to make it work. Yeah. And that kind of like, we can get this to work, because we don't do stories about continuity, we do stories about stories. Yeah. So yeah, that's probably not a very good answer, but it's like basically what you can get away with. And I research and I try to at least. I like the idea that all my stories can be picked up by anybody and read. I will tell you anything you need to know in the story. However, stuff that is solely continuity, I won't mention. I will try to put a nod in for people
who love that stuff.
For people who know it, to basically excuse this. Yeah. And it's kind of like, I mean, it's like Vader. It's like the first issue is Tatooine, which is I'm so bad at pronouncing any word, so I can't even pronounce 4. My THs are terrible. But it's like, obviously Vader being on the planet is, that's loaded in many ways.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not going to stop and say I cannot go. It's bad for me to return to this planet because of my awful history here and all the things I connect with it.
Yeah. You just have to.
I can do soft nods in the story without making it explicit. So that's what I try to do. To anybody who cares enough about the content, I hope is attentive enough to realise I'm trying to throw them a bone. Your primary urge has to be to the story you are telling in this moment.
Yeah,
especially with the Marvel Universe, it's an exciting hedgerow. This is so many stories are published and they interlink and they form this exciting mesh of things.
Yeah.
And if you actually genuinely try to go through it, it is maddening, and there's some fundamental things you cannot even reconcile, which is kind of... I sort of joke is if you think about the only thing you have to believe in the Marvel Universe is the Marvel timeline. You have to simultaneously believe that the Fantastic Four watched the moon landings. At the same time, the Fantastic Four only went on a rocket ship 12 years ago. These two things are not contradictory. You have to believe them once in a kind of like 1984 double think.
Right, okay.
Give yourself to it.
Yeah. As in, you have to accept this, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And, you hold both those contradictory ideas at the same time. And once you've done that, the rest of it's kind of easy.
Yeah. You touched upon Vader a little bit then, so I'm interested. Obviously, that's the big thing that you're working on now. But I think I read somewhere that you almost turned it down. Is that right?
I considered it. It was like, Jason said yes immediately in that kind of like Star Wars way, and rightly so. I was like, it's few. I think this is. I wanted to do a villain project for a long time. The idea, there was lots of things about the project I liked, but specifically what held me back was I'm trying to know how to phrase this. The idea that basically we would be doing important scenes.
Right.
As in the idea, this is basically the thing that attracted me to Vader in the end, was that, it's not just doodling in the margins of a story.
Yeah.
These are fundamentally important scenes for Vader's history. This is canon in terms of stuff. We've never seen Vader's response to understanding that Luke is his son, and that those kind of things. And we've never seen, lots of things in there, specifically the reactions, and it's like I would get to do that.
Okay.
And I would get to the person.
That's a lot of weight to shoulder. Like.
And it was like, the weight doesn't bother me. The question is, would I be best for it?
Okay.
Because Star Wars is something that is fundamentally important. This is like, I'm at the age that Empire was the first movie I saw in the cinema.
Yeah.
So in other words, these are formative. As someone who writes Pulp Fiction for a living, these are formative things that lie in the gut of me.
Yeah.
And the thing about Star Wars is I'm the sort of fan where if it's not good, it's not really Star Wars I care about.
Yeah.
And I say that and kind of like, it's really the quality is what matters. It's got to basically up to that scratch. So I was like, and is there anybody else who could do this better? Who writes for Marvel and is in the position to be writing it?
Yeah.
And is there anybody else who, or at least much better, I'm sure. And is there anyone else? Yeah, those kind of questions. And is this something you really want to take because you're taking an opportunity? And it's not just like, I'm going to be writing Iron Man for a bit and then someone else will write Iron Man.
Yeah.
This is very specifically, here's a hole in history. I will be filling that hole.
Yeah.
And that's what made me think about it seriously. And then I sort of went away and I thought, actually, no, yes, that this is, I probably, in terms of like Marvel writers, how do you phrase this? I like villains more than most of them.
Yeah.
As in, I think my villains are better than my heroes. My most successful books, my X-Men, you could certainly argue my X-Men run was basically the X-Men as villains. My Journey into Mystery is basically me writing Loki. He's my definitive character, probably for Marvel. All those kind of problems. I'm very interested in the question of why people do bad things.
Is that something Marvel identified and came to you with, or is it something you kind of knew was happening?
This is what I talk about. I run the dialogues myself. I'm aware that I'm very interested in bad people. In that kind of like it bugs me because everyone knows what is good. Why would anyone be bad? That's a very simple way of putting it, but that's kind of that is right at the heart of a lot of my better writing, and I say that in quotation marks.
Yeah.
I hate myself again. And I thought, well, no, it's like, this is, and you've always wanted to do a villain book. I mean, my head, part of me is like, I kind of want to do a Doctor Doom book. It's one of those kind of like, Doctor Doom makes a lot of sense to me. But the idea of like, no, me doing Vader in this position, in this time, this is very exciting.
It's so important as well.
Yeah.
Like,
it's kind of, it feels very cool. It's like, and I think it's weird because I thought it would be much harder than it's proving to be. I was expecting, the idea, any time you, not working with one set of, working with Marvel is one thing, Marvel and Lucasfilm, the idea that this would be a lot of work. And it's been actually fine. They're being incredibly generous. Their actual suggestions are great. When they say no, I get why.
Yeah, okay.
And I've come, all those sort of things. And when I'm writing it is delightful, which is a weird thing to say about Darth Vader. As I write it, and I have enormous fun with it. As in...
They're not saying no to you. You're like, no, he doesn't listen to David Bowie. You can't be listening to David Bowie all the time, Kieron.
He doesn't have coke.
He's got a cape. It's much more James Brown.
Of course he does.
It's much more James Brown kind of like, cape and hottest working man in show business.
James Brown's the Black Panther, so you can't have that.
I'm shocked by how much I enjoy writing it. In that kind of like, I'm not banging my head against the wall or anything. It's like... The tone is freeing. I feel genuinely quite free when being as this awful person. And that's kind of like both me and Jason, who's obviously writing Star Wars. Kind of our aim is to make it feel like Star Wars, not like a tie-in. The idea of like the tone has to be okay. How does and Jason's job is quite different from mine. Jason's trying to make it feel like Star Wars with the Rebel cast. So in other words,
so Jason's comic, just to fill people in, launched about 3 weeks ago, something like that. Star Wars issue 1. Marvel got the rights back from Dark Horse, and your Vader's set at the same time as his comic.
Well, the idea is they're kind of in exactly the same period, and then sort of
is it between
New Hope and Empire. We pick up pretty much immediately afterwards. And we kind of, what I always describe as soft crossover.
Okay.
Because when me and Jason previously wrote Uncanny X-Men and Wolverine and the X-Men at the same time. And each one had their own very different tones. Like Wolverine and the X-Men was much more playful, and mine was a very big, serious superhero team as Nuclear Deterrent book. But there was enough threads going on between them that made it, if you read both, it kind of paid, especially with like also Rick Remender's X-Force at the same time, you could see elements being picked up by books, but if you only read one you wouldn't notice. That's kind of what we're doing here, in the idea that I start just after episode 3 of Star Wars. So in other words, Star Wars opens with a raid on a military base, and I pick up on Vader reporting the results of that raid to the Emperor.
How does that actually work at the level of just like your workflow? Do you like just talk about ideas? Do you send him scripts while you're working on them, just so he can like then extrapolate something he can use himself?
We're aware that we create enough space to do our own stories, because basically what Vader's up to, the way I describe it is basically, in Jason's book, Vader is the arch villain. He's Darth Vader. He is this oppressive, enormous black figure who is behind them every step of the way. They can't escape the guy. In my book, that's what he does on Tuesdays. He's a man who is. He's got
a file of facts.
He's got so many other things to do. And I'm basically the primary thrust of my book is the other things.
Okay.
At the same time, whilst him trying to find time to hunt down Luke, because he, quite early in my run, he realizes who Luke is and what that means. And my last 20 years of my life has been a lie. In some, and that's about as big as it gets.
That's huge.
If you think about that, for genuinely dig into the emotions of it, it's really interesting.
Even if you take Darth Vader out of that, and that's still horrible.
So it's the love of my life. I thought she died, but B, that's further down the line. But you can imagine all the kind of responses somebody might have to that. I have with Vader, and of course the trick of writing that book is not doing that without reducing Vader.
Of course.
Vader's a move, I don't do like internal narrative captions or anything like that. You are slightly distanced to Vader. And so there's a lot about reading into what he would feel. And we have a supporting cast around him who kind of pick up the weight there. But Vader is, I put this in the original pitch document, you should be scared to be in the same room with him. It's never comfortable with Vader. You're aware that if the wrong thing is said, you could just be dead. And that's kind of part of the book for me. So whilst Jason is doing the kind of the Star Wars mood, I've got to work out a way to make something feel like Star Wars from the evil point of view. And there's the problem with the thing I have to overcome is that if you just do a straight Empire book, you've got a load of guys with face masks on, so no one can emote. And B, it's all very there's not much. Star Wars is about like capital R romance, the glory and the freedom, and the people doing enormously cool things, and not the fascist jackboot on humanity. So I had to work out ways to, without reducing Darth Vader add elements that are analogous to a Star Wars. And make
Can you talk about the supporting cast? Like, this podcast will go out after the comics out.
It's weird. Actually, the first issue is very much concentrated on Vader.
Yeah.
As in, Vader visits Jabba, and it sets up the situation. I mean, the situation is he is one of the sole survivors of the biggest military disaster of all time. And if you rewatch all the Star Wars movies, the Emperor was planning. The Death Star was the plan. We build the Death Star, takes 20 years. And then we can finally get rid of the Senate, which they do at the start of New Hope. And then we can rule the galaxy because we don't need the Senate because we've got this enormous threatening device.
Yeah.
They don't have the enormous threatening device anymore because it blew up. This is really bad for the Empire.
Yeah.
This is kind of like they can't no longer. So it's the entire. So one of my favourite things is writing the scroll text for the first issue, and I write that scroll text in the style from the Empire's perspective. It was a time of insurgents. It kind of goes from there. That's there's so much.
That's very cool.
That's fun, but at the same time, it doesn't undermine it, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. At the same time, Vader's not solely to blame. He is at least the only person to blame still around.
Yeah.
The idea, he let the rebels escape with the plans deliberately in an attempt to get them find their base. That is completely what he did deliberately.
Yeah.
So if he didn't do that, they would probably still have the Death Star. So his standing has fell in the Emperor's eyes.
Yeah.
And of course, when you get to Empire, he's recovered his standing. There's an implied story that Vader ends up, and at least a lot of my stuff is about. I mean, the metaphor I always use is House of Cards. Yeah. And the idea here is a powerful man who feels slighted, who turns to methods he might not otherwise do to regain his standing. And, obviously Vader's a very different character from Francis. Yeah. But that kind of structure, the idea of Vader trying to do stuff secretly because he no longer can do stuff openly.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a lot of the things that drive a book. Supporting cast... I wouldn't say the inspiration for this, but one of the inspiring things was watching in Empire, when he's briefing the bounty hunters.
Yeah.
Two things there. Micromanaging. Yeah. Shouldn't do that. He's got bigger problems. Two, he knows them all.
Yeah.
There's specifically when you're commissioning a freelancer, you say, don't be late with this one. You really can't be late with this one.
Yeah.
That's exactly the same Boba Fett no disintegrations. There is a familiarity there. Yeah. The idea he has moved in bounty hunter circles before.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of says you a bit about where we build up the supporting cast. The idea of in the underworld, there's a lot of crossing over there and those kind of characters. Yeah. I mean, Boba Fett turns up in the first issue as everyone have seen.
Yeah.
But there's people I invent, there's people who are new, but they're kind of the darker side, and that allows you to. Darker side, I mean more shadowy side, that kind of roguish area.
Yeah.
So that allows me to build up characters with very different personality types from just the stormtrooper. Yeah. The idea that you can do stuff outside the fascist organisation. And to be honest, that feels more Star Wars. The kind of the
of course,
you need a Han Solo, and my Han Solo, the character who kind of fits the Han Solo archetype, introduced in issue 3, who is a character called Afra, who is, we said this in the list, she's kind of like ethically inverted Indiana Jones would be a good way of putting it. She's someone who finds old artifacts and weapons and puts them in the wrong hands. Okay. Because it should be in an armory. Yeah. In that kind of way. So that's kind of, and there's fun but she's both fun and playful, also really messed up. Right. Okay. So that's kind of tonally. It's like it's a very. My book's often a dark mirror. To Star Wars itself. Is a good way of putting it.
How much of it is, I mean, I was just interested in when you were talking about, it's Vader's fault that they, got out there with the plans. It almost sounds like this is pub chat that I've been having since I was like 18, 19 years old, with people going, well, actually, like, how much of that do you, as being a Star Wars fan, do you bring into your actually writing?
My most extreme fan theories have entirely been thrown out because we can't do that. As in, they're literally cheating. Yeah.
We actually had Gary Witter on the podcast last week, and he was saying there's a couple of people at Lucas who they're like, they know every single thing. They're like oracles. Did you have access to them? Could you go to them with your ideas and be like,
what was the thing they had once?
The
called the Holocron.
Group. Oh no.
Like the centralised continuity thing. I went to a talk about it at Star Wars Celebration. You
really? Okay.
The story group are pretty much those people, as in they're kind of like. So it's interesting.
They're like, no way.
No, I don't do anything deconstructionary. It's the best way of putting it. As in, like, I mean, my joke. If you get me in the pub, I do a kind of joke reading that Obi-Wan knows everything. Obi-Wan actually killed Luke's family to make them go with him. Right. Because he immediately, before Luke tells them the family is dead, Obi-Wan actually comforts him. And it says that, that's these are definitely, and he also killed all the Jawas in that kind of like, these are definitely Imperial marksmen who did this. And it's like, obviously I'm joking for that, but if you want to do an extreme reading,
of course,
but you wouldn't do that in any series. But they're kind of, Vader completely, Vader explicitly said, we're taking a big, Tarkin goes, we're taking a big risk here, Vader. They will lead us straight. And then you get Leia going no, but let us go. So this isn't even like a conspiracy. This is very explicitly the story that people tend to like. They tend to forget that bit, I think.
Yeah.
Where was I? So that building off that struck me as very, because it's a big mistake. Vader isn't going to shirk that off. Vader will take responsibility because he's that guy.
Hold his hands up in the pub, guys. On Friday, I'm really sorry, I messed up here.
On me.
I must say, writing Vader and the Emperor together is fun because it's kind of when you start thinking about the power struggle between the two, especially when Vader realizes that he has been lied to. There's an implied the power differential there and what they are not talking about. And any scene, this is secret of drama is what they're not talking about.
Yeah.
For me, the secret of drama is what people are saying is minor. What they are not actually genuinely expressing is where things get interesting.
Yeah.
And so any scene I've written with those two in, really, really fun.
Yeah.
So that kind of, and the plot elements that kind of come into play. I mean, basically, in the first episode, Vader becomes aware of two things. A, he's aware that something's going up with this Luke kid.
Yeah.
Not that he knows who Luke is, but the name. But he knows he's not an idiot. As in, you get a series of flashbacks. So he pieces these information together. As in, he had a light. We will see in Jason's book, he had a lightsaber.
Yeah.
He knew Obi-Wan.
Some training.
This guy was strong with the Force.
Yeah.
And that kind of, it's really fun sitting down writing. The Force is strong with this one, even in a flashback, and I get paid for that.
Yeah.
Brilliant job.
Well, we've got a weekly Star Wars show called Rebel Base, and we took the first issue and we sort of tore it apart, not tore it apart in a bad way, but sort of went through it quite sort of methodically. And a lot of the things we were saying is, some of the references maybe felt a bit heavy-handed, whereas there's a bit where he says these aren't the slaves you're looking for, and he goes, well, that was worth a try. And we were like, okay, for me that feels slightly heavy-handed. Like, how hard is it for you when you're writing to sit down and go, you need to hit the references, you need to hit the the fanboys up, but
I think it's a really hard line. I think it's a really hard line to walk. There's definitely some bits of like, I wrote and then I cut. Yeah. And I wrote, then handed in, and then we cut. Yeah. In that when I had
you wrote, laughed, then we're like, no, we can't do that.
There's also the more jokey it gets, the more
exactly. Yeah.
There's a couple of Afra specifically. The fact she's a bit more playful means that there's a few lines she said to Vader in issue 3 when she met him. Yeah. Were referencey, and I was like, no, this is too much. Yeah. I'm very glad we lost them. Yeah. But there's other soft. I mean, there's a bit. What do you feel about issue 1? Where I've got a good feeling about this. I thought that was good. I like that.
That was one of the ones actually we thought.
Yeah, we like that.
I thought that was a really good one
because I feel like it's something people would say.
Yeah.
Like I think it's very hard because you have to realise it depends how strict you want to be with the logic of it. And the characters within the situation would have no knowledge of any of this stuff. About, so if they hark on it or channel it, it's kind of strange and reality breaking.
Yeah,
it's really
difficult because
it's an illusion. Because it's kind of like the opening scene of Vader. I don't mean in a bad way, but the illusion, as in how much people are willing to go with it.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of bits where I'm writing Vader very straight.
Yeah.
It's about there's very little of I'm quite a meta writer. I generally talk about the fiction I'm writing a lot, and I'm not doing because that's not Star Wars.
Yeah.
But like the opening is Vader heading into Jabba's palace. And he walks, and it's basically a kind of shot-for-shot reconstruction of Luke's
and those pages are in Star Wars.
They are, yeah.
And that is walking line there, but the point is, I'm trying to. It's not really a joke. It's about drawing a difference. These are two characters who are similar.
Yeah.
These are two.
Yeah, I think it is because this is what Luke will. What will eventually happen. Yeah. This is somewhere we will later see.
This is what Luke will. But in fact, we know what Luke does in that situation. What Vader does in a similar situation and different tells you how Vader is different to Luke.
Yeah.
And all the way through that. Yeah. I mean, there's one of my. All the way through that. That's kind of how it works for me.
Yeah.
And that's the point of that. Is in basically. In some, Luke is the lead of Star Wars. Vader's lead of my book. Yeah. So drawing the Dark Mirror, that's the kind of, I said that earlier, but that's kind of how I'm thinking of this. Yeah. And Vader turns up and he acts very differently towards Jabba than Luke does. It's even stuff like the pit. As in there's a bit he's standing on the pit and he just steps back. He looks down and then he takes one step back and they exchange glance. And that's because Vader's better in the Force than Luke is at this point.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's and those kind of, whilst they are clearly dancing with the text, that I would hope they are not too much for people. Though to be honest, it's something
so hard.
Trying to difference between showing something new and something. There's elements of there's part of the fanboyness of it.
Yeah.
You kind of want to see stuff at the same time you want to make up new stuff that feels like Star Wars. Is the way I would put it. And that's a lot of my idea. I've thrown a load of ideas out which I thought were interesting, but not Star Wars. And especially with the villains, as in a lot of Vegas antagonists are new characters.
Yeah.
So I'm trying. What can I do that's new in Star Wars? That's the big challenge. A lot of them are fun. As in when I sat down and I watched all the movies I had in my notepad.
Yeah.
And we watched it very intensely, me and my wife. And there's pages of scribble. This is if we ever do a big collection, big scribble at the back, I suspect we should include.
That's amazing homework.
Was that part of the pitch process?
Or it was
after that?
It was. I can't remember which order I did it. I think I actually did this. This is after. As after it was kind of like, let's do it that way. As in, it was me looking for meat.
Yeah.
As in, I kind of had I didn't need the close reading wasn't required because the basic pitch is Vader Vader builds his own power source inside the Empire, trying to reclaim his status as he has fell after the events of Star Wars. That's kind of stuff I could do off my knowledge of Star Wars.
Yeah. As part of that process, did you watch the prequels? Because obviously, you would have grown up with one particular embodiment of Vader, and then obviously later in your life you would have got this additional information about who this person is, more knowledge, more kind of things to draw upon. How much did that stuff factor in?
Intensely. I mean, this is all kind of when the fact that the current situation due to the extended universe and the compressing and the current situation, the canon is controllable. The canon is the 6 movies, Rebels, Clone Wars, or comics, and the 2 books. Yeah. Unless I'm missing anything, that's I can consume that. As opposed to Marvel, and there's no way you
have some mastery of.
Yeah. I can actually have a close reading of the canon that's available. Especially the movies, which are the thing which most people will be aware of. So, in terms of Vader's emotional journey, and I think you need to kind of Vader's realization that he has children. You need to use the prequels by definition. That's kind of and that's why it matters to Vader, and that's why it's such an enormous, everything changes moment for him. I lean on it all pretty much equally in terms of thinking about Vader's interiority, in terms of what he's thinking.
Yeah. As someone who's working on the Star Wars content, when the Force Awakens trailer obviously came out, what did you think? Because that does a really fine line of just brand new stuff, but then ends with a Falcon.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's you want Star Wars, but it's kind of like that's the thing, you want Star Wars, but here is new stuff, here's also, and here is kind of how the two mashing. Yeah, and that's what I genuinely hope with the Jabba's Palace stuff is. Jabba and Vader in a room, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And same, and it leads to different places, and we start doing new stuff, and there's that kind of element. I think as Marvel, it's really, the one thing with the story group is very interesting, and that especially the further I go on, the more I kind of I want to use a crime organisation here. Yeah. I can completely make one up. Is there anything you would suggest? Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's kind of quite cool.
That's cool. Yeah.
And that's in other words, if you're writing a genre plot. Yeah. If there's something else, because the continuity is so small. I know small in the relative sense of the Marvel universe.
Yeah, of course.
As in,
50 years of
if you make connectivity in an interesting way, that's a pretty cool opportunity. I want to lean into it. At the same time, there's some of the ideas. I'm very happy when I get a little note from the story group. I love this. Yeah, that makes me quite happy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very cool. Yeah. I'd like to move then. So let's talk about. We touched upon it a little tiny bit earlier, but music and comics. So Phonogram, huge musical comic. Working Divine, I'm a huge fan of. The music runs through that entire thing. How do you write and make a comic that's essentially about music?
I'll tell you what, it's one of these weird things. Of course, comics and music are kind of literally opposite. Yeah. In that with comics you have control of your visuals. And you have no sound, and you don't have any control of timing. As in people that you can't control how people will read your book. With music, it's literally the opposite. You have no visuals, you only have sound, and you have perfect control of timing. As in, you can present people in information, or these are literally opposite. Yeah. So it's impossible to do a one-for-one translation, and that's kind of where we started. And that's kind of the appeal of it, the idea of trying to do something actually easily achievable. It strikes me as desperate under ambition. It's like, and there's a sort of magic when you fail to achieve something, and you kind of have originality by default. As in, okay, here is an impossible problem. How can we try to even capture a slightest bit of it?
Yeah.
Okay, that'll work. So that's kind of what we do. So me and Jamie spend a lot of time thinking about different techniques.
Yeah.
And the actual initial Wick Div's going to bed to that night, which is basically our rave issue, and the entire issue is about there's a lot of drug stuff going on here.
Yeah.
There's a lot about like ketamine-esque time dilation. We have like sensory blur. We have lots of colour and like visual effects, and we have a sense of momentum and how the.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it's like across an entire issue, and we kind of did something similar before in issue 7 of the Singles Club, the second phonogram volume, which is basically structured around the song "Wolf Like Me" by TV on the Radio.
Okay.
And it was basically how the paneling worked, created a beat, and it went intro, verse, chorus, bridge, breakdown, repeated chorus to end.
Yeah.
And what we did with the visuals and the story, we tried to create a narrative structure that basically mirrored the thing in the song. So we're trying to basically get the sense of fluid momentum.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're doing here. So that's like one way we did it. And there's so it depends how much you want to lean it. And sometimes it's just, okay, very extreme examples. That's when we really push it.
Yeah.
And occasionally it's just more like dudes talking shit in the pub. You know, that's kind of like, it's more like the conversations you would have around culture.
Okay.
Because, we use music more. And I think, somebody, I wrote about games, I think the reason I do music more in my comics is because I had an outlet to get all the games out. So I did games writing, I did music writing for various places, but never as much. So this kind of these ideas sort of sat in my head like a weird sort of pus boil, and eventually exploded at the top. Whilst games got to be slowly drained.
Yeah.
Basically, I just think it's interesting, and the idea of actually, it's kind of what criticism is anyway. No criticism will ever really capture what the art does, but you try to translate the feeling into the words or what you're talking, and get something from that. Some of my favourite reviews, literally, I synesthetically get what the medium is.
Yeah.
That, I guess. It's the fact it's impossible is at least part of the challenge and the interest.
Okay, cool. But I mean, it's such a big part of the issues as well. But when I asked you about it just over email, I said, there's a couple of songs. You sent me a playlist that was like 250 songs.
I think it's 260 now.
260 now, yeah. But every single one that I listened to, I could think, and I was quite new to Wicked and Vine, but every single song that I listened to, I was like, I can hear the comic in this song, and that is a really odd thing for me to sort of put those two together.
Thank you. I mean, it's like because I've started doing playlists for quite a long time, and since Spotify makes making playlists public easier, I've done it more. And Young Avengers was big. Yeah. That was like 110. And Wicked and Divine is it's like a 30 to 60 issue series. So I swear, by the time the end of it, it'll be every song I've ever liked. But that kind of the mood of it was very important, especially because like last year was very intense for me personally. There was a lot of like songs as shorthand for emotions or states or thinking or ideas. I mean, like especially with Wicked and Divine that's a great noise.
It sounds like a big fart. It won't pick up that much.
That's a shame.
A big fart. Right, when you say something really meaningful.
It's like, and the mood of Wick Div, we basically we can actually do a comic we're going to make a big pop record. I mean, there's this one of my favourite reviews, a critic called Doug Walt did. It's like Lennon and McCartney sat down to quote unquote write a swimming pool when they did Imagine. The idea that we're going to do a really big pop record. And Wick Div is us. Okay, this is everything we do, but we're going to do this on the larger scale. We're not going to be like self-defeating narrative. We're going to actually we actually think this is going to be enormous. We're going to love it. And we throw everything we've ever loved about pop culture, not just pop music, everything. So this is, from the Warhammer to the games to the club stuff to all the movies we've ever loved into one package. This is kind of, as a guy who is, I'm 39, about to be 40. This is kind of like the entire story of everything I've loved and defined myself as a creator and a writer and a human being. It's a big
one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just kind of like the funny thing is this is like 10 years on from Phonogram. Like the first Phonogram was very clearly about me turning 30. Like it was actually me dealing with a lot of those kind of stuff, and this is very clearly about me being 40.
Okay.
It's like, you know, I'm afraid of being 30 and old. And it's about being afraid of being 40 and dead.
Yeah.
In a very real way. It's, oh my god, I'm always going to die.
Yeah.
Brilliant. You know, what genuinely is life for? Why be an artist anyway? That's kind of what Wick Div is beneath the surface. Yeah. So the songs are used to ways to think about. So there's bits of weirdness. There's a lot of like, these are really big pop records. Yeah. That's kind of part of it. As in the idea that the tone is euphoric and sad and weird and like, and when you start putting me in a list, you remember how many pop records are about people dying. Yeah. How many pop records are about people dying young. I mean, the idea of Rick and Divine being, if those who are listening don't know, it's basically every 90 years gods are reincarnated on Earth, who are loved and amazed and hated for like 2 years, and then they die. So this is basically a device to concentrate the concept of mortality, because it doesn't mean if we're alive for 2 years or 10 years or 70 years, that's still a very finite time versus the eternity. Yes. So why do anything? So that's kind of what the book's about. So it'll go, anytime we start talking about what Wick Div's about, it goes pretty dark. I
like that about it, and I think the point of, you know, I think it's quite an unforgiving book as well. Like, I don't think it eases you in at any point.
Oh no, it drops you right into it. Like,
and it sort of doesn't even assume like that you have any knowledge, because there's no way you can have the knowledge from. Was that a thing that you guys thought? No, we're gonna write this thing, we're gonna make this thing, and people have to go with it.
I thought. The funny thing is, me and Jamie swore we thought we were being accessible. Yeah. We thought we're going to try this time. We're not going to be like Phonogram. We're not going to be like Phonogram. We're going to actually try to eat. No. I don't know. I think we must have higher standards, higher tolerances. Yeah. That kind of nonsense.
I love that you call it nonsense.
Yeah, no, it's like, I'm aware that I find it interesting. I pull stuff apart, and in terms of, I try to like. There's probably definitely bits we've misstepped, I guess. But we do quite like respecting an audience's intelligence, which is kind of all these. Which I find, I don't like saying that because it sounds like insulting to anybody who doesn't get it. Yeah. But we're aware that this is kind of the pace we would accept our stories at. Roll with us. We'll kind of get to everything in the end. Yeah. And you know, we'll genuinely, you know, if you don't need to know, we won't leave you in the dark unnecessarily. Yeah. If you don't need to know it, we won't tell you it. Yeah. As in, so if you don't know something, relax. It's fine. You'll get there. You'll pick this up in time. Yeah. That's kind of at least the part of the attitude. It's weird because the issue of issue 9 is kind of the interview with Anank, who is kind of the elder figure in the pantheon. And it's like, and we finally get some straight answers. So it's going to be quite nice for people, I think.
Who does the interview? Is it because there's a critic character?
Well, you can guess.
It's there from the beginning, and
I can't say who does the interview. Yeah,
okay, right.
But I think if any who guessed who would do the interview, they would probably be right.
Okay, right, that's good.
How much is obviously?
They are fun characters to write. Honestly.
Amazing.
I'm just going to give it away. Yes, it's Cassandra. Cassandra is the very cynical character doesn't believe anything. Yeah. Those two characters. The headbutts is actually really good, as in because it's quite issue 8. I said it's the big rave scene, so it's a lot of flesh and a lot of very sensual. That's a word. Me saying the word sensual sounds horrible. Yeah. This is like quite dry. It's almost like a one-act play. Yeah. In this kind of like these characters in a very intense space.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I think the reason I like Cassandra is because when you first meet, you just think, oh god, I've seen this character so many times. But then the more it goes on, and you go, actually, there's so much more to that character, actually, that we're not seeing because she actually genuinely cares.
It's true. I mean, I try. All the characters are complicated. It's like Baal. It's like okay. I think Cassandra is almost like she's the flip of Laura. Okay. You know, she's kind of like, you know, Laura's this ultimate fangirl, and
exactly.
Cassandra isn't the opposite, and they are.
But they work together so well.
They are tied together, and that's kind of like that was very explicit. And Cassandra is really good. It allows me to auto critique the book. Yeah. Pretty much anything I say, anything Cassandra says, I think's right. Yeah. And so, you know, she's Cassandra. No one listens to her. Yeah. It's like, yeah, this is iffy. And
there's precedent.
Exactly. It's like she should have chosen a different name. That's definitely the thing. But it's like Baal. You know, Baal is very aggressive and very egotistical, and he's like a character who's at the same time I think by this point anyone who's been following the issues realise he's probably one of the more moral characters. Yeah. Yes, he's abrasive, and yes, he frankly is very arrogant. But there is a sense of worry for people, and also the willing to sacrifice his own things to other people that kind of running in through that. He's just, that kind of, because people are complicated. We aren't that simple. Yeah. Even people who I hope we're more complicated anyway.
So it's the theme tune for our episode, but Summer Camp's Pink Summer you said it's a theme tune for your book. Why is that?
It was like November. our favourite con in the UK is Thought Bubble in Leeds, which is astounding. We've loved it. We've been to every one. We were invited to it on the first. That was our kind of the first con anyone invited us to.
Yeah.
So it's grown enormously. So it started out like a few hundred people, and now it's like 10, 12,000. So it's a medium-sized UK con. But they let us DJ. And it's the DJ, and the DJ party has grown every year, and it's almost like our Christmas.
Yeah.
It's like and this year was in the town hall, enormous dance floor, people throwing shapes till 4 in the morning again. This is weird and like bacchanalian, so I love it all. But specifically that year, Summer Camp, who we know and are friends with, were playing. Just a venue there, so we went there, and I just had a moment. I listened to actually lyrics to Pink's. This is pretty much
It's fantastic.
This is A, it's brilliant, but B, it's kind of pretty much what the book's about.
Yeah.
And it's like, and the idea of like somebody in a quite similar position to me and Jamie, as in a duo.
Yeah.
We're talking about the concept of love and need and death. This may kill you. This may kill us. What a way to die.
Yeah.
That kind of like back and forth antipathy to it all.
Yeah.
That was something really appealing, and I sort of like halfway through the gig, I sort of it clicks, and I ran outside and just like made sure I made a note to upload it to the playlist.
Yeah.
And we did a launch party for the book when it came out, and we booked out. It's quite funny because like we have this. They don't do launch parties. This isn't like video games.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a proper launch party. We're going to book out a venue. We're gonna book a band.
Amazing.
Have like it'll be great. And so Summer Camp, we paid them. They came and played. So basically, they're very much in my head tied to the whole endeavour. And it was a great song.
It is a great song, yeah. I just watched Beyond Clueless in the summer, and they do the soundtrack for that. And I went to see the film shown at a festival, and Summer Camp performed the score live. It's so good. You should definitely do that with the next book. Get them to come and
cool.
Actually, we generally. We talked to Summer Camp about collaborating quite a bit.
Yeah.
As in there was, in fact, we're both very busy.
Yeah.
So there's something we're definitely doing shortly together. But there's a larger project we've talked about a few times.
Oh wow, excellent! Yeah.
And it'll be very cool to do if we can find a chance.
Definitely.
Like, if we find a spare month, we could do it.
Must be hard when you have to write all these Star Wars comics.
It's hard life.
Okay, we're just going to go to some. We had some feedback then. I'm going to just go to some of these. We had a tweet from Duke of Havoc. He said, "Dear Kieron, and what's the split of workload between writing comics and coming up with puns for Twitter?" I'm assuming you know this guy.
Yeah, he's a gentleman. He runs a website. I'm not going to plug it because you're being mean to me. But writing up puns is entirely pleasurable. That's kind of something I do to avoid work.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's about 90% of my workload, and 10% of my workload is actually work.
Okay. So the next one's from John Hudd. He says, "Which is your favourite Star Wars movie and why?"
Empire, because I'm a bit of a goth. So kind of, all about the Empire. I'm writing Vader, therefore the Empire striking back is a good thing for me.
Yeah.
It is really as Empire. It's just kind of like I find the actual structure is fascinating. I find the fact it's the unresolved nature of it, the fact how it sort of floats in space, no pun intended. The weird sort of gleeful dark romance of it all, and of course there is, as I said earlier, this is the first movie I ever saw in a cinema. This is formative. This is origin story stuff.
Yeah.
Empire.
Cool. I'm just going to go on a bit of an indulgent digression here.
Go for it.
My girlfriend's father coined the word goth in relation to music.
Really?
Yeah, he used to write for
more.
sounds. He was called Steve Keaton. That's the pen name he used to write under, Steve May. He coined the word goth in relation to music when he was reviewing this band. And we went to the British Library recently. They had this big goth exhibit, and we didn't know it was there. We got onto the last part of the exhibit. There was a Clive Barker stuff. Went around the corner. It was like how goth had been appropriated by subcultures. And there was this huge placard of her father's article. And she was like, "No way!" And we spoke to the British Library, and she managed to get this from the British Library. He's got it up in his office now.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
No, I went to that. It was amazing. It's like, I loved it enormously. It's, there's been a big. I'm wearing an Alexander McQueen jacket here, so I'm very much in the kind of school mode last year.
Yeah. So when she went to the British Library to collect this exhibit, she contacted them and was like, "Oh, my dad wrote this. Can I please have it for his office?" And the woman from the British Library came down and gave it to her. He's like, "Yeah, I thought I'd recognise you. I thought I'd basically just look for the most gothic person in the lobby."
It's like last year at the British Library had a comics exhibit, had a goth exhibit.
Yeah.
It's like, was I curating that year? It's like kind of like it generally could not be more me if it was horrific.
Yeah. And finally, then from Carl Barrett, who asked, if you were to create a comic based around another Star Wars character, who would it be and why?
Oh wow. I immediately want to go with Joe Cans. I would probably Bobber. That's an easy answer. Let's go a bit weirder. It would be. I just want to do the bands. You know, the idea of basically doing phonogram. You know, the entire.
Oh, that's such a good idea. Yeah,
you can do it. It'd be good.
That'd be good.
Max Reader.
So yeah, so Vader should be is already out now. By the time you listen to this,
it should be.
So that's good.
Put it live at the right time.
The fact it's it's out there excites me enormously. I really can't wait to see what people make of it.
Yeah, but thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank
anyway,
you.
I'm sure we'll see you again very, very soon. And thank you very much for listening.